right now to everyone first chiming in live on a replay. There's going to be a lot of profanity said throughout the next 10 minutes or so. I'm going on a complete rant. I'm absolutely livid, but I do want to be cognizant of my viewers that are chiming in, as I know that they range in various ages. So to all my young ones out there, please have the earmuffs on, or please make sure you skip a little bit forward, maybe at least 10 minutes in the live show after it's already happened if you watch on replay. That way you don't have to hear some things that you probably otherwise shouldn't be hearing, and I'm going to absolutely lose my mind. So I'm going to do a 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then on go, that is where I'm going to be my true self here, because right now I'm absolutely bottled up and I'm about to lose it, okay? On a 3, a 2, a 1, a go. You gotta be fucking kidding me. The Mets did not show up to save their life in this matchup and their most important game of the season yet. All they need is a series victory against the Atlanta Braves. I know it's Atlanta. I know it's a tall task, even against this bottom feeder club, when you look at how much more talented they can be when they're healthy with Austin Riley, when they're healthy with Ronald Acuna Jr., when they're healthy with Sean Murphy actually knowing how to hit a baseball, and everyone else in between. This Mets team needed this game one with the uncertainty tomorrow, with the uncertainty truly there on Thursday. We all know they look like they're set to have at least one makeup game, if not a doubleheader. Now the Mets absolutely set themselves up for failure here. Can they bounce back tomorrow? They absolutely can. But I'm losing my effing mind right now because we saw so much deja vu nonsense that we have seen time and time again for this Mets team, not only in Atlanta, but this was the exact same shit we saw Schwellenbach do to the Mets back on July 27th, and the Mets have had time to prepare. They have had all the time in the world to get themselves set for this matchup, and they were not able to do it. They could not get the job done. So, in this not victorious matchup, but in this deflating loss to the Atlanta Braves, we're going to break down to an absolute T what transpires in this one. How you doing, everybody? All my Mets and Braves fans chiming in live on a replay. It's your guy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest New York Metropolitan post-game show presented by BetUS, America's #1 sportsbook. Check them out today for all your sports betting needs and use Wardy's promo code YouTube150. That way you too get a 150% bonus on your first deposit, a 125% bonus on your second deposit, and another 125 on your third for all your sports betting needs. But I apologize if you watch our pre-game coverage. If you guys tail my bets, you came out like a fat loser, just like myself and just like the Mets in this one. God forbid the Mets as the money line underdog there, finally looking actually exciting that they're at plus 125 odds. I get it, they didn't hit Schwellenbach in the past back in late July. I understand that in Atlanta anything can happen regardless of what things are currently looking like for the Mets and the Braves heading into this matchup. But miss me once, oh my goodness, shame on me. Miss me twice, it's clearly my fault here with this one. I should have known right away that Schwellenbach was going to do the same shit again. We saw the writing on the wall. The big bugaboo, everybody, the big problem that we have in tonight's show is as follows. When the Mets go out here and they give up runs early because Luis Severino doesn't have it the way he certainly did in the third, between bad fundies galore, because of course we got to run into Francisco Alvarez, because of course they both have to go the ball there. Of course Starling Marte has to overthrow the runner when he's clearly driving in a run, at least with an RBI single. All these bad fundies plays that could have been avoided is what started the recipe for disaster, which was that godforsaken 3-run third inning there by the Atlanta Braves, and that in itself was the nail in the coffin. Everybody, we have a lot to get into in this matchup as we're going to deep dive everything to an absolute T. But first and foremost, everyone watching live on a replay, I want to see your initial reactions. I want to know how you're feeling after deflating one like this, as the Mets sadly faltered to the Atlanta Braves in this one, and a deflating loss to say the least. Pat W with the $5 thank you so much. Let's see here. Embarrassing team loss. Strategy-wise from Braves sitting dead fastball from pitch 1 while eating sliders outside Vientos' pathetic team effort. It was an absolutely godforsaken team effort. And I have jokingly tweeted earlier that when Mark Vientos drove that home run to make it a 4-run deficit there for the Mets, that he hit that home run because he cared. Obviously, I know everyone cares about the Mets. We understand this. Everyone cares on the Mets, rather. But when you looked at the at-bats today, when you looked at on this entire game transpired, this looked like a lifeless Mets team that had the absolute wind sucked out of them as soon as they were deflated and gave up those runs that Sevy coughed up in the third inning, and they had no clue, they had no recipe whatsoever on how to combat this. There was absolutely none. I looked at this Mets team as soon as we saw what transpired there against Schwellenbach. Now you make matters worse knowing that, okay, you couldn't get the job done against the rookie right-hander who carved your ass up there there back at the late July. Now you have to face Chris Sale tomorrow. That is likely not going to be a rain out. You might miss Fried on Thursday because who knows what's going to happen with that game, but that also means the Mets are going to have to be rescheduled and potentially have their postseason fate decided on an off day, which no one, and I mean no one, wants to see. Everything that basically could have went wrong in this one, and there is a positive, any positive whatsoever, is that Francisco Lindor was set to take an at-bat should Mark Vientos have gone on base there in the ninth and not falter by flying out the way he did there to White in the outfield. If that didn't happen, we see at least one at-bat from Francisco Lindor tonight. So if there's any positives, if there's anything to look forward to tomorrow, it's at least knowing that Lindor is as close to the status of playing as possible. That's never a bad thing. Even 80% of Lindor in his bat is certainly better than what you're getting from what was a shit show offensive performance top to bottom, not named Mark Vientos, and you were quite literally irrelevant in this Metropolitan lineup. Luis Angel Acuna matching up there against the Atlanta Braves and against his older brother's squad. Did have a base hit thanks to Orlando Arcia bobbling the ball just like Acuna did in the beginning of this ball game, but there was really nothing else that she wrote outside of that. Someone talked me off the ledge. Ethan, there is no reason to get on the ledge. However, I understand that deja vu, and I understand fans having the PTSD moments kick in left and right and say, oh my God, oh my goodness gracious, this is happening again. We're not at that point, but yes, there are similarities, and yes, it is hard to separate the two. And for any fan out there that says, oh, Wardy, you know, we're not going to connect this to 2022 at all, you already are. You're the same fans out there that are not saying that, but then are talking about how the Mets have had great rallies in the past against the Braves when they have happened. We can't nitpick when things have went right in the past versus when they haven't went right. All we know is historically, when the Mets have had big games in Atlanta, they have continued time and time again to falter and fall short. All they needed was a series victory. Now we'll be lucky with a series victory, knowing the weather status for the next couple days, and knowing that this is a Mets team that had a chance to control their destiny. That is not out of the realm of possibility still, but it gets a whole lot more difficult against an Atlanta Braves team that, oh yeah, you just handed life to. You just gave them excitement. You just gave them a reason to believe that they're still in this thing until the very end to push for postseason play. All those factors and then some is what leads to the great frustration that we have right now. Michael with the $2 holla, same old song, Mets won't make playoffs. See, that's the nonsense that I'm missing completely. All Mets fans are on the pessimism level of saying the Mets are not going to make playoffs now. You guys are the same one, with all due respect, that wrote off this team how many times this year? So again, I greatly appreciate the donation. I know that you've been a long-time supporter, Michael. Thank you so much. But I couldn't disagree more. Seriously, you need to stay with your team. I understand the frustration. Trust me, I understand the frustration. I understand the course of the 162 at the same time. However, the exact reason why you never heard a Wardy say it out of his mouth at any point this season, the season is officially over. There's no going back. There's no way that they can return from this. There's no way that they're not going to make playoffs, right? There's always going to be this kind of route going down. No! The Mets have proven us wrong. They have done it time and time again. I am not going to write off this team whatsoever. However, I am going to give them an earful, whatever you call that godforsaken performance we got tonight in Game 1 at Atlanta against this Braves team. I want to know from you Mets fans watching live on a replay, what is your initial reaction to the following? Seriously, I want to see it from each and every one of you. The Mets faced adversity in this. They had no clue how to handle it. They faced a Schwallenbach who had the recipe for success, hammering those sliders too. It didn't matter in that splitter. They had nothing to show for it. When we look at the Mets on the pitching end, that has carried them how many times this season? Color me shocked that when we look at the Mets and when we look at their frustration in this ball game, it has everything to do that we saw there with Luis Severino getting cooked there in the third inning. If that doesn't happen, it's a completely different dynamic. Maybe the Mets don't score much offense in general, but they still are at least closer in the ball game potentially. Severino, the Mets needed a bulldog iron from, and regardless of who's at fault there between himself and Alvarez to kick off the third, it doesn't change the fact that he could not settle down before it was too little too late. Yes, only giving up 3 runs and 4 on the day isn't the end of the world, but with an offense that has been carried by the starting pitching how many times the past month plus, how many times have we seen this Mets team win close 2-1 ball games, close 3-1 ball games, or the offense breaks out after it was a pitcher's duel between the two respective starters for the first 5 or 6 innings. We have seen this story time and time again. That is what pisses me off. That is what gets me nuts, because we know the story. When we say, oh my goodness, it can't be this again, it can't be deja vu, it's not that we want to speak it into existence, it's because we're actively seeing it happening. And I get that. And I also understand the two people that separate themselves as well, that find themselves saying, okay, this one absolutely sucks, but I know not to buy into it more than that. We'll see what happens tomorrow. I'm that type of fan, but I also understand the fans right now that simply cannot get out of the mindset of, this is 2022 all over again. This is all going back to the late 90s. This is early 2000s again. You know, it's deja vu. It's this and that. All I can tell you right now is that this was a gutless game by the New York Mets. A gutless game. There's no other way to look at it. They had nothing to show for Schwellenbach. They had a couple key early opportunities with runners in scoring position in which if they pounced, they're in this ball game. Oh, my entire jersey, my little Mets jersey, that's an absolute thing of beauty. Love it. Absolutely drenched already. Pat with the $2 donation. I do not feel good with Pearson as four-seamer. Yeah, I mean, I have some concerns with David Pearson tomorrow. I think everyone has a level of concern with David Pearson tomorrow. If you're wondering where exactly that stems from, it has everything to do there with David Pearson's lack of success he's had at times with the Atlanta Braves. I think of that home run he gave up to Matt Olson just like it was yesterday back in 2022 in Atlanta after he got ahead there and the ump absolutely screwed him on a call. Next pitch, Matt Olson, multi-run ding-dong, and that blew it open. The Mets ended up losing that ball game, I believe. Yeah, I don't have the utmost confidence in David considering that he has not been as consistent over his past, 4 starts total as he had been the previous 4. He's kind of been up down lately, got rocked in Toronto, bounced back greatly for his next two starts, got rocked in his last start, didn't go beyond 4 innings or so because Mendy was like, I'm just not going to risk it, even though that was a recipe for disaster to begin with. What is the commonality that we have seen, Mets fans? When this rotation does not go deep, it has been a recipe for disaster. Not that we should be relying on starting pitching to the degree that we are, but regardless, we still are. So if we're going to be, then we need to make sure the bats at least do the bare minimum and step up the way that they're supposed to. They're not even doing that, and that's a greater problem for this Mets team as we then evaluate them heading into everything else going on with them for Game 2, Game 3, and the rest of the way. Thank you so much for the donation, Pat Benson. I appreciate that. I said, Wardy, for decades we have been the Braves bitches, and I see no end in sight. I hope this end begins as soon as tomorrow, my friend, and I greatly appreciate the donation. I understand the concern. I understand the frustration. I'm just here to tell you that in the end, hopefully, fingers crossed, the boys can get their head out of their ass, shake this one off, and be resilient the way that they have been in various ways this season. The same reason why I'm not going to write off this Mets team is the same reason why some of you Mets fans decide not to write off the Mets when they were 11 games below 500. I know this game was ugly. I know it was far from perfect, but there is still so much vulnerability when I look at this Atlanta Braves team, and there's still so much success I can see being had with this Mets team. Yes, the pitching matchups is the major concern, and the weather. It's a recipe for disaster for this Mets team in that sense alone. However, you need to go through the gauntlet in order to have success. The Mets ain't going to do shit this year, even if they crack postseason play, if they can't handle these key matchups. Pete Alonso said it himself in 2022. The Mets were not only deflated, but they lost themselves as a collective clubhouse. They were too tight. They simply were too angst, and they could not handle the pressure. What did JD Martinez, who's been riding the bench for many games now, Francisco Lindor, and others preach, going back to the Jorge Lopez situation and the team meeting? It was to take it day by day. You got to shake this one off as soon as humanly possible. You have no turnaround whatsoever. Right away tomorrow, you're back at it. And for all we know, who knows, the status of that game may change based on the weather that's coming there terribly there in Atlanta the next 48 hours or so. For this Mets team, they need to simplify. We saw a lot of what I thought was tight baseball, a lot of early jitters, and clearly on the bad funnies, just nonsensical shit that tends to only happen when we're in Atlanta. The Braves didn't even have stellar defense not named Michael Harris today. This was the Michael Harris game, by the way, in case you guys didn't watch. He dominated, home run, double, run-saving catch there. Not run-saving, but a steal of he stole a single at least there of Acuna there in center with a gorgeous diving catch. Michael Harris did everything and then some as a human highlight reel, sadly, and the Mets just had to sit there and take it and feel embarrassed, and they should be embarrassed after an outing like this because the Mets are the top dog entering this series. It's not like the Mets headed into Atlanta knowing that they need a series victory with so much on the line and that, they're the little brother, that they haven't been the better team between the two this season. No, the Mets were 2 games up heading into the series. Now just 1 game up. They still control their destiny. I'm very aware of that, but this just makes things 10 times more difficult than it need be for a Mets team, and all they needed to do was just hit competently in this matchup. They didn't even need to go home run heroics to the point of scoring 7, 8, 9, 10 runs. All they need to do was just be competent there against Schwallenbach, but simply Schwallenbach is their demise, and that would be the end of the Mets in this matchup. I see donation from Relaxation. Thank you so much. He says, $5 holla. I hope it didn't waste money buying tickets for all 3 games. Silent bats. Yeah, I mean, game 1 not ideal. Game 1 not ideal. I mean, if you were at tonight's game, obviously not fun at all. That's a waste of money. However, if the Mets do find themselves off the right foot early tomorrow, then hopefully things are better. I'm assuming you're talking about Atlanta Braves Mets series tickets. If we're talking about playoff tickets, that's a different animal. That will not be available for the Mets until as soon as, I believe, Thursday. Funny that the Mets are already unrolling their potential playoff tickets when we don't know if even playoffs is a certainty for this Mets team right now. I don't like that. It tends to be bad juju at times, but no less, I appreciate the support, my man Relaxation, and hopefully the Mets can turn things around as soon as tomorrow. Scrolls inning from Adam, Danny, Brosman. Yes, you know things are not going right in Mets land when their key pitchers here, or Adam Ottavino is your first pitcher tonight to not give up a hit. Yes, you heard that correctly. You had a scroll sitting there that we saw from Adam Ottavino. You also had a scroll sitting there from Danny Young, which is absolutely insane to say. And even when the Mets had these contributions from guys who have been thorns in their side in the bullpen as of late, it doesn't matter. In the end, they still go on, and they still lose this one by a final score of 5-1. So without further ado, folks, let's get into this, and let's break down, let's rapid fire what transpired in this matchup. But ultimately, how are the Mets going to go about this from here? Let's get 35 people for the suite. Leo, yeah, let's get a suite going, baby. Who said no? Who says no, right? Seriously. Appreciate the love there. Tip the cap to Schwallenbach. No, Schwallenbach pitched great. I'm just pissed off because I would have thought that after the Mets got cooked by this kid and the end of July, that they would have learned their lesson a little bit, that there would have been a different approach, a different game plan. They looked just as lifeless and just as clueless against Schwallenbach as they did when they faced him for the first time back on July 27th when he went 7 innings, 2 hits, shutty baseball, 0 walks, 11 strikeouts against the Mets back in the end of, July, as I mentioned. Nothing has changed since then. D-backs losing, that's great. That's awesome. If the D-backs continue to lose, that's one less thing to worry about when it comes to trying to crack postseason play. However, this series means everything, not only for the Mets to make playoffs, but for their confidence. That is something that I really think needs to be highlighted in this discussion. This entire series is supposed to be a huge confidence boost for this Mets team. If they lose this series, and even if they take the Brewers, there is going to be some pessimism heading into potential postseason play. There's so much on the line here, not only from the sake of just making playoffs alone, but the mentality the Mets may have heading into potential postseason play. And this is all without saying that they need to crack playoffs first before we even talk about these things. I had fans talking to me pregame on the Mets' chances to crack the first wild card. First of all, no, that's a very hard thing to do over the Padres right now. And secondly, why are we focused on shit when we have nothing secured? Can we focus on what's in front of us? I feel like every single time we try to do that, we get ourselves way too far ahead, and then we find ourselves looking like schmucks in the end because the Mets say don't crack postseason play or whatever it might be. John, thank you for the $2 holla. I greatly appreciate that. But guys and gals, now let's get into a bit more on this matchup, and then I want to hear more on what you guys have to say. Mets lose this one in a gutless fashion, sadly, by a final score of, 5-1. And it begins there in the first inning as the Mets would try to get some early offense. Jose Iglesias with a little bit of an infield dribbler. However, in a very Metsian fashion, in a devil magic fashion there at Truist Park, we see Jose Iglesias out with his own ground ball. Yes, you heard that correctly. Iglesias bolting down the first baseline, has a little bit of a dribbler. It hops. It actually hits him in the process of running. So yes, he literally tagged himself out in Iglesias. Nothing else transpires in there. In the bottom of the first, Michael Harris gets on with a single. Albies gets on with a fielder's choice because Luis Angel Acuna bobbles the ball. He wasn't given an error, but they do allow that instead of a double play. That allows the force there, and Acuna, now he's at first, and then Harris there at second is out. They can't turn the double play. Matt Olson now with a single. Jorge Soler with a strikeout ends the inning, but not the easiest inning of work there for Mr. Luis Severino. And in the second, the Mets would get a walk from Pete Alonso. Nothing else to show for it at all. Luis Severino, a 1-2-3 step right up, and that would be the only 1-2-3 inning he'd have on the day. As we then enter the third inning with 2 outs, Jose Iglesias makes his hitting streak now a whopping 17 games. There's something to root for and be excited complained about earlier in this ball game, it was certainly that. Iglesias gets on with a single. Nimmo then reaches on a Orlando Arcia error. He continued the bad funnies all game long, which we greatly appreciate. But Marte there grounds out to end the inning. Mets trying to get some damage there with 2 on, 2 out. No avail as Marte looked horrendous in the 3-hole today and equally looked horrendous there in right field. He made one catch that you're saying, oh, was that impressive? It really wasn't, because if you understood the context of the catch, he only got there so late because he was late. It wasn't like he had great positioning and, oh, I just got behind him. No, he was behind on that ball. He was not in the proper position, which is ultimately what led him to making that almost snow cone catch and saving at least a double from happening. So Marte with a less than ideal day all around. He was my one gripe in the lineup, funny enough. And I don't know, the Mets didn't hit for shit today, but it just is kind of funny how when I look at the lineup configuration and how Marte was my one question mark because I didn't love him that high in the order, he ended up not having the best day at the plate, nor did he have a good day defensively either. After Marte continues to have his best up there, the Mets don't do anything there in the 3rd inning. And that would come back to bite them in the ass terribly that we would see here in just mere seconds. Cherno, thank you so much for that donation. What the hell does Marte even do? That's hilarious. I wasn't even reading your comment yet, and we were thinking the same. He said, so many chances, has done nothing but get the trophy in the ground out to short derby. DFA him, I don't give a fuck. Fuck Pete too. First of all, I don't agree with fuck Pete. I think that's wrong to say, so I'm going to retract that. I don't think I should be saying F Marte either. Am I frustrated? Yes. Am I frustrated with a lot of things with Alonso this season? Yes, absolutely. Am I frustrated with the fact that the Mets are now 25-38 against the Braves going back to 2017? Yes, I am. Even having said all those frustrations and all those things, Cherno, it isn't going to change anything. All we need tomorrow is for the boys to shake this shit off and bounce right back. Because if they dwell on this the way that us Mets fans dwell on this, the way that we dwell on the very unfortunate reality of the PTSD we had back in 2022, this team's going to get nowhere. So we got to take our own advice as well, and we got to try to flush this right away as soon as we can. This one sucks. That's why we're talking about it. But as soon as we're done talking about it tonight, I hope I never have to talk about it again, because the Mets take game 2 tomorrow. No less, everybody, this is where everything goes to die for the Mets. In the bottom of the 3rd, Orlando Arcia gets on there with a single. He gets all the way to second base. Why? Because a throw-in error by Mr. Severino when it had everything to do with there and Eltro Alvarez. Alvy going for the ball with his back turned there to first base. Sevy trying to get it as well. Sevy and Alvy basically trip up each other for a split second, and that allows Sevy to completely botch a throw there to Alonso at first base. That gets Arcia to second with no outs. You know shit's going to happen right from there, and sadly it would. First pitch swinging, Michael Harris rips himself a double to drive in the first run of the day. It's 1-0 Atlanta. Then afterwards, his first pitch swinging by Ozzie Albies. Because of course he is, and then he finds himself on with an RBI single. 2-0 Braves. Matt Olson gets on with a walk because of course he does. 2 outs later, Ramon Laureano, who was one of these late season acquisitions, along with Gio Urshela, he drives in the run to then make it 3-0 Atlanta, and they would never look back. In the bottom of the 4th, with 2 outs, Michael Harris rips his home run. That is now going to make it 4-0 Atlanta. And by the time it was 4-0 Atlanta, my demise felt like it was there. It felt like, okay, this is ball game. I did not have the confidence I wish I did in this Mets team because I knew how well Schwambach was pitching. I knew that they already wasted a prime opportunity the inning prior. Just think about it, folks. If the Mets score 2 runs there in the top of the 3rd, the bottom of the 3rd doesn't happen simply put because the inning was extended. Severino is resting a little bit longer than what he initially was going to do in between innings, and that changes the dynamic of everything. I'm one of those people that's like, okay, if that person wasn't there in attendance, then nothing can be actually the same if we're viewing it in different universes or however you want to go. And that alternative universe, if the Mets scored a couple runs in the top of the 3rd, I don't think that they plummet and falter the way that they do in the half inning thereafter. However, they do plummet the way that they do. You have the bad funnies there in the bottom of the 3rd, and sadly, the Braves never look back. So it's 4-0 through 4. In the 5th, then we see Harris dives for a tremendous catch to rob Luis Angel Acuna of a single. Thankfully, Acuna would still get an infield single before the game's end, but brilliant work by Michael Harris. All I can do is tip the cap, and all I can do is be beyond pissed off with the reality that was that situation. So it's still 4-0 as we have the bottom of the 5th, and just like that, Luis Severino's day is done after 4 innings of work, 4 earned runs. No bueno. Without even doing a deep dive, Sevy is getting, for me at least, he's getting a 3 out of 10. I mean, 2.5 to 3 out of 10. Very discouraged by his outing today. Did not give the Mets length. I know he's not at fault for all the bad fundies, but how you compose yourself is very important. Severino was not it in a time where we need him to be it. And that's a serious problem for a Mets team that has been far too reliant on their starting pitching to get them where they need to be. Let's see what we have here in some comments, folks, and then we will continue from there. Appreciate the donation. Ralph with the $5 holler earlier says, I think my donation messed up. Mets got to respond tomorrow, punch back. All there is to it. LGM, my man. And yes, they absolutely do. Hyper with the $5 holler says, it's not over till it's over. We got to shake this off. Earlier than the New York Rangers made an incredible comeback today, and they come back, so can we. Shout out to my Rangers as always. Last time I saw they were losing 4-2. Nice to see them rally all the way back. Hopefully Ryan Lindgren is okay, because I did see that he was taken out for the rest of the game, because of course he got hurt. D-Mac with a $5 holla, great member, says, you gotta believe Mets have answered and bounced back all season. You gotta believe indeed, my friend, but I understand the frustration and the pessimism that we find ourselves dealing with here tonight as the Mets falter in game one, knowing how much is at stake the next 24, 48 to 72 hours. But guys, Mets, as we then head to the top of the fifth, they have that great catch. In the bottom of the fifth, then Stanek comes in, and Stanek, what does he do on the second pitch? He throws to Marcell Ozuna. It's a fastball up right down the dick. He's going to rip that every single day of the week. It's almost like one of the best home run hitters in Major League Baseball is going to eat up anything fastball in the zone up high. He does exactly that. He rips that one opposite field for his 39th home run of the year. Everyone's least favorite Atlanta Braves said everybody here, and Marcell Ozuna makes it a 5-0 lead for Atlanta. We would see the Mets retaliate and rally back at least a little bit there in the 7th inning, as Mark Vientos would have himself there with a home run. This was after, mind you, Stanek got out of a jam after that home run. Soler got on with a single, but Laureano double play ended it. We advance all the way to 7th inning. Nothing happens in the 6th with either club. That's notable. And the 7th, Vientos rips his 26th home run of the year. He decides to give a shit. He says, you know what? No one else is going to hit. Let me be the difference maker. Mind you, Vientos wasn't just the lone run scored and a home run for the Mets in this matchup. He was the only Met to record multiple hits in this game. Jose Iglesias 1 for 4, Luis Angel Acuna 1 for 3, and then a whole lot of zeros. The Mets had a total of 4 hits to the Atlanta Braves 10, and the shit show you call a ball game. And Adam Ottavino with a 1-2-3 7th inning, because how? Because why? Because of course it happens. The one game the Mets really don't need it in hindsight. Acuna singles thanks to the Arcia bobble there in the infield in the 8th. They cannot drive him in, however, and then we see nothing else transpire for the rest of this one. Danny Young takes care of work there that we see in the 8th inning, and then we head to the 9th, and the Mets go down so quick in order, unbelievably quick. Pete Alonso first pitch swinging. Jesse Winker first pitch swinging. Mark Vientos, all he needs is 3 pitches, and he flies out, and that is your ball game, folks. The Mets go on and lose by a final score of 5-1. They look to retaliate and rebound as soon as tomorrow in a game that matters so much more than it needed to. Let's see. Camp with the $2 donation says tomorrow bench Marte and Winker, put Lindor at DH. Winker was 100% not going to start this game. Winker probably won't start for the next 2 days, knowing that the Mets play Sale and Fried. Even though Fried, that game is going to be washed out, as we know. So we'll find out what happens with the Thursday status of the game. Hopefully we find out as soon as tomorrow, obviously, with the weather and all the confusion going on there with the hurricane coming in Atlanta. But yeah, Winker is not going to face left-handed pitching to begin with, so you're not going to see him in the starting lineup in DH tomorrow. Who you're going to see DH tomorrow very well could be Francisco Lindor. Seriously, especially after a loss like this. Let's think about this for a second, folks. The Mets lost 2 out of 3 in Philly a weekend ago, but they rebound beautifully by winning an entire series sweep against the Nationals and securing 3 out of 4 against the Philadelphia Phillies. It's easy to disregard and kind of put Lindor on the back burner when things are going right. Now, when you're faced with your biggest battle yet, your biggest test yet, the Mets come out flat-footed the way that they did. That is what's going to probably warrant more of that Lindor conversation. That is what warranted Lindor to come off the bench and to be set to take an at bat should Mark Vientos have gone on base in the 9th inning to begin with. What does this lead us with? Francisco Lindor will be available for tomorrow's game, barring changes. He will either be starting in DH or coming off the bench, and he will likely get at least an at bat. So that is a plus to look at 1,000%, because even at 80% Lindor is huge. However, I do also have a level of concern with Lindor coming back, not only to potentially hurt himself more, but also knowing that he hasn't played in over a week. This is the first time since Lindor's first year with the Mets, he has not missed this type of time. When we look back in 2022, when he hurt his finger there to kick off the Dodgers series in LA, he only missed 1 game. Even with that being his middle finger on his throwing hand, knowing how important and how much that hurt every game, it didn't matter. We go back to that oblique injury in July or June against, I believe it was July, against there in the Pittsburgh Pirates. in Pittsburgh. That oblique injury is the last time Lindor has missed any sizable time. Just missing a week of Lindor throws him off rhythm. Why does Lindor want to play every single day? Why is Lindor always relentless on being in the lineup, even if he isn't 100%? It's because he knows how important it is for his regimen, for his routine, and to stay afloat as consistent as he possibly can. The big wild card that we now have with Lindor tomorrow is we don't know what we're getting. So fingers crossed, knocking on wood, we get the Francisco Lindor, who's been guns blazing with the bat as he did leading up to his injury. But it would not shock me, nor should it shock any of you, if he kind of comes out a little cold and flat-footed, as you'd expect with a guy with a barking back for the past north of 10 days now. It is not good. It's not a great situation to be in, but this is what us Mets fans have to deal with at the moment. It is what it is. Let's see. Michael, thank you so much for the $10 donation, Saya. Really appreciate that, brother. Thank you for taking the time. And guys, as you continue to let me know your initial reactions and thoughts to this Metropolitan loss, I want to continue to see and hear from each and every one of you. What is the big takeaway here? Because for me, I look at this Mets team that collectively, when we look at their lineup, had absolutely nothing to show for it whatsoever. I look at this Mets team as one that was simply lifeless from basically start to finish. And when I look at what they need to do here against Chris Sale, what they're going to need to do against Chris Sale is something that they really haven't been able to do before. But all they need is 2-3 runs to just keep themselves in the ball game, and good things will surely happen. Zach, thank you so much for the $2 donation earlier. He says, Sevy should be an afterthought in the offseason. I don't agree with that completely. I think Severino has done a lot of great things for the Mets this year. And yes, today's start wasn't ideal, but we shouldn't let that define him on the year either. I would absolutely bring back Severino on, a short-term deal as long as it's within reason for the Mets. And I don't think that we should deviate from that just because of the start. Severino isn't overly brilliant. You know what you're getting with Sevy, but it's been the consistency which has led Severino all year long. When we're not getting consistency from Severino, there's a problem. And tonight, this was one of his worst starts that we have seen now in the second half. Probably, I think this is Severino's worst start since his first start post-trade deadline for the Mets, where he got absolutely rocked. Appreciate the donations from each and every one of you, though. Thank you guys so much for that. Let's see. Braves Voodoo. It is Braves Voodoo. It's 100% devil magic that they're doing there. You can't tell me otherwise. Zach, I did just address the donation. Thank you so much for that, my friend. I hope you're having a great evening. But yeah, this one stings, folks, and the Mets are going to have to try to rally back. They're going to have to retaliate the best way that they can. Thank you all so much to all of our live and recurring viewers, as we are also close to 100 likes. If you guys could help us get to around 100 by the end of the live show, to our 300-plus live viewers, that'd be greatly appreciated. We're not going to be too long-winded tonight because, as we know, we have a big matchup tomorrow and the coming days, and I want to make sure that we are rested and ready to go in these ones. But I do have to just share a little bit of the following with each of you, because heading into this series, my initial thought process as a fan was follows. We know how important it is to take 2 out of 3, yes. But we also know how important it is to kind of right the wrong and change the narrative. How sick and tired are we as Mets fans of this narrative that they can't handle the Braves, that the Braves are always our daddy, that we just, as soon as we enter Atlanta, everything that's good goes to die. We have seen this story time and time again, and maybe that's shame on me for kind of having that mindset too. I don't want to think about 2022. I don't want to think about those things, but it's so awfully hard after the Mets just continue to give you examples to find yourself falling in that category. Tonight's example was exactly that, to a T, from top to bottom. This was pretty much what you would be getting. So now the Mets, after laboring big time in this game, not only need to ground themselves to bounce back for Game 2 tomorrow, but now they have to face the potential uncertainty on what is going to happen now when we look at the weather status. Very well could be a situation where Thursday that game is moved earlier in the day. I think that is the best scenario if the weather is permitting, but I think it might be so bad that they may have to push it entirely. So if you have to at least push one game, that's not ideal for this Mets team, because that means that they're going to have to fly back to Atlanta for Monday for potentially one game. Could they do a doubleheader? Yes, but that means that they're not going to play tomorrow then. And tomorrow looks like it very well still could be in line. It's greater than Thursday, still a question mark. When I look at this Mets team and I look at their schedule in the next couple of days, this can go in various routes right now, which increases the level of concern. Knowing that this is a ball club, that if they do drop, say, tomorrow's game that they do play, then they have a big problem, because they not only have to make sure that they take that final game against Atlanta and have themselves a tiebreaker not only on the season, but where they're currently aligned in playoffs, but then they have to also focus heavier than maybe they initially wanted to in the Milwaukee Brewers series on how to handle that entire situation. And while Milwaukee might not be as locked and loaded, ready to go, because they might be already comfortable that by that point, clinching postseason play and knowing that they're in a solid spot, but they're always a hard team to face, and the Mets have been absolutely horrendous in Milwaukee since I've been a fan, at least. So there's not a lot of confidence on that front. The confidence has come with this Mets team. Let's see. Wardy deserves my money more than the Mets do. I don't agree with that, Michael, but I really appreciate the donation, my friend. Thank you so much for that. I greatly appreciate you. But what I got to say here on this Mets team, everybody, is simply this. They're controlling their destiny as we see it right now. But this one's tough. This is a very tough pill to swallow. And I need to see the boys locked and loaded and act like they give a shit tomorrow, guys. That's what I want to see. They just look too lifeless. This was just such an uninspiring ball game to kickstart a vital series. It would be different if the stakes were in the way that they were. And it would be different if the Mets didn't have kind of the seesaw of emotions that we fans have been going through, going back to their lack of success in Atlanta. But either way, they need to absolutely bury this one as soon as humanly possible. They need to bounce back as soon as tomorrow. Everybody, before I let you go, as we just take a look here at the wildcard standings, they are as follows, folks. The Mets are just one game ahead of the Atlanta Braves. They very well could still be, however, a half game up on the Arizona Diamondbacks should Arizona falter tonight. So at absolute worst, the Mets are still in the third wildcard by a game, and at best, they find themselves a half game there in the second spot. So while, yes, tonight's loss really sucks, Arizona has been helping the Mets to a degree, and hopefully that continues. That is what I'm going to leave you with, everybody. My sincerest apologies for being a little hot-headed earlier in the show, but I got a lot to say. These games mean so much to me. I know they mean so much to you, and it just really discourages me to see the team come out as flat-footed, as lifeless as they did in game one of this matchup. Until then, everybody, have a fantastic rest of your night to evening whenever you're watching this, and this is your guy, Wardy, signing out. No matter what, and I mean no matter what, let's go Mets, baby. I'll see you all tomorrow.